Good evening and welcome to Montage on Dante, presented by the Italian Cultural Institute Los Angeles, celebrating the 700th anniversary of Dante Alighieri's death and his influence in cinema and television. As part of the original Dantikum film series dedicated to the importance of the supreme poet in cinema, it is organized in coordination with the Italian Embassy in Washington, D.C., under the auspices of the Italian Consulate General in Los Angeles, and it is also part of the celebrations of the 160th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Italy and the United States. And it is also part of Dante 700 and Mondo, the program promoted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, launched on DanteDì on March 25th, that will continue until the week of the Italian language in the world in October. Alessandro Marianantoni, director of Mediars and M Accelerator, will illustrate Dante's influence through some intriguing collages of images, videos, and music. He has produced several interactive installations, such as UCLA, for organizations such as UCLA, Google, Siemens, Universal Studios, Disney, Amazon, and the city of Pasadena. He earned a degree in computer science at the University of L'Aquila, specializing on perceptual interfaces at the USC Institute for Creative Technology and Integrated Media Systems Center. Director of Mediars, an experimental center focused on cultural heritage and technology, he is also the executive director and founder of M Accelerator, offering programs to serve the Los Angeles and international startup ecosystem. Alessandro will be in conversation with Massimo Ciavolella. Massimo Ciavolella taught Italian literature at the Carleton University and the University of Toronto, prior to his position as chair in Italian Renaissance Studies and distinguished professor of Italian and comparative literature in the Department of European Languages and Transcultural Studies at UCLA. The public is invited to ask questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom after the presentation. Thank you, Alessandro and Massimo, for being with us today, and thank you all for attending. We hope you will join us again for future events such as Italian Research Day webinar on April the 15th, Language, Mind and Brain, a conversation with Massimo Piattelli Palmarini, organized with the Italian Scientists and Scholars in North America Foundation. Also, as part of the Dantekum film series, on April the 28th, we will be hosting a webinar featuring the artist Sandor Burke and director Sean Meredith, discussing their collaboration for the film Inferno. And now, without any further ado, it is my great pleasure to present Massimo Ciavolella and Alessandro Marianantoni. Massimo, the screen is yours.
Valeria, grazie. It is a pleasure seeing you, of course, and Alessandro, we are old friends, of course, and we have spoken in many occasions on Dante and cinema. Like you quite correctly said, this is the 700th anniversary of the death of Dante. And while many other places around the world have dedicated their interest on conferences, for example, or discussion on Dante's Divine Comedy and Dante's minor works, your institute was quite correct, I think, in dedicating so much time on Dante and cinema. Very few people know how much the Divine Comedy has influenced cinema. As you know, or most of you probably know, cinema begins, motion pictures, in fact, begins, they say, on December 28th of 1895, when the brother Lumiere, for the first time, show a train moving in front of an audience within an enclosed space. Now, this is 1895. In 1908, so we are talking about 13 years after, in the United States, a company called Vitagraph, which used to be very popular, made a large number of motion pictures at the time, did in fact make the first film on the Divine Comedy. It was on an episode of the Divine Comedy from the fifth canto of Inferno, the fifth canto of Hell, the episode of Paolo and Francesca, and in fact, the movie was called Francesca da Rimini. What is interesting is that the year after, 1909, another film of Francesca da Rimini was made, and then in 1910, and then in 1917, and more and more. And then other episodes from the Divine Comedy were filmed. Pia dei Tolomei, for example. There was a film in 1911 on the entire Inferno, which is one of the longest films done. In fact, at the time, 1911, it was the longest film, lasting over 60 minutes. Now, this filming, mainly episodes, lasted until 1928, when D.W. Griffith, the famous director, one of the founders, they say, of contemporary cinema, also decided to dedicate a film, a long film, on the episode of Francesca da Rimini. The Drums of Love is the name of the film. After 1908, rather than filming episodes on the Divine Comedy or trying to film the entire Divine Comedy, which probably is an impossible task, the Divine Comedy began influencing, from a thematic point of view, cinema in general. So no more concentrated on one episode, but certain aspects of the Divine Comedy being brought into films, into cinema, American cinema, of course, and European cinema. And what Alessandro is going to show is not only the first part, let's say, the episode dedicated to the film dedicated to an episode on the Divine Comedy. In fact, the first film on the Divine Comedy made in Italy, on the episode of Francesca da Rimini, again from the fifth canto of Hell, but he will also show how much the Divine Comedy has influenced cinema in general. His montage is the only montage that I have seen on this aspect of Dante's influence on cinema, and is also an extraordinary document. So, I want to leave the word, I'll pass over to Alessandro, who will talk about how and why perhaps he decided to do these two montage, this film first and the montage after, and I'll just listen and enjoy once again seeing these films. Alessandro, è tutto tuo.
Thank you. So Massimo, thank you Valeria for the great introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks everyone listening this evening here, at least the three of us here in Los Angeles. So my background is definitely not coming from Dante Alighieri, and the companies that the director Valerio Rumori mentioned about are related to technology, I would say. Of course, I work a lot in cultural projects. I work a lot in the entertainment. I met Massimo and Valeria when I was still a researcher at UCLA, and I was a researcher and a senior researcher and principal investigator for about 10 years. So I've done, for me, quite a long career in the academia. And at that time, I had so many opportunities to work on cultural projects and art projects. I was part of the RIMAP Center, a joint research effort between the School of Engineering and the School of Theater, Film, and Television. So over there, I got a great exposure to film and visual media in general. And I still remember exactly when probably we're talking about, I shouldn't mention about, I think we're talking about 16, 15 years ago, when Massimo approached me and asked me, would you like to do, would you like to contribute to our conference, upcoming conference on Dante Alighieri and the Divine Comedy with some work, visual work, right? So I started studying essentially the contributions. Actually, I remember several references from Massimo, and helped me to he pointed me out to some work that was already done in terms of collecting and researching. I remember a book from Amilcare Iannucci pointing out some of the references of in the Hollywood cinema with Dante Alighieri and the Divine Comedy. And I created this first video, which was an extremely crazy collage, I would say, and of montage of fragments, like Massimo was saying, about movies and TV episodes related to the Divine Comedy, but also, especially in this first fragment that you're going to watch, which is 7 minutes. It's an adaptation of the Francesca da Rimini from 1910 directed by Ugo Falena. And it's a silent movie. So my job in this section was, you would say, with a long experience in sound editing, you would say simple. I mean, I only edited the audio part and trying to reconcile the visual elements and the rhythm with the music, which I picked Dante Sonata by Liszt. And that for me was mainly a work of reconciling the emotional levels throughout the music and throughout the movie. Of course, when you're listening, the sound, the composition by Liszt was not, he didn't compose the movie, he didn't compose the soundtrack based on this movie. So that was my work at that time, trying to reconcile these two elements that they didn't know anything about each other, I would say. The only common element was the Divine Comedy. So I would invite you to watch this first fragment, 7 minutes, with Francesca da Rimini, directed by Ugo Falena. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, so hopefully I gave you a little bit of background on what was the challenge for me to reconcile the two, audio and video, and what the story that was happening and taking place in both media, the sonata and the movie. So the next video is it's a binge Dantikum is collection of about 40 contributions, fragments from movies, very well-known movies, and TV episodes, probably over the last 20 years. So it's it's pretty exciting, I would say. It's definitely easier to watch for general public. There are some of the movies and actors that you will recognize, and it's pretty fast-paced. So hopefully you enjoyed this one as well. It's actually, I can say a couple of words about how I did the research. At the time I was working at UCLA, and this film school over there, we have a very furnished and well with so many DVDs essentially. So not just I'm not talking about the movie archive. I'm talking about another database that we as our scholars and researchers have access to. So I was able to basically triangulate some research on internet, triangulate every mention to Dante and the Divine Comedy on the scripts that were used to do movie productions or TV series production. So fortunately, this work it's more recent, but we're still talking about probably 15 years ago. So it was already possible to use internet and find databases where there were like hundreds of thousands of scripts, and you can triangulate all the words in the Divine Comedy, looking those words into the scripts database and come up with the names and titles of the movies and series, TV series produced and somehow inspired or loosely mentioning about the Divine Comedy. So I'll invite you to watch the second contribution. It's 13 minutes, and I'll see you after the video.
Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood.
Mahalo. It's still sweet 282.
Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole?
Ever read the Divine Comedy?
Excuse me, sir?
The Divine Comedy. Dante Alighieri's Journey into Hell.
Maybe we should take a break.
Dr. Ferrer might hold in his hand his non-Italian hand, a note from Dante Alighieri himself. But would he recognize it? I think not.
Poi la svegliava desto cuore ardendo, lei spaventosa, umilmente pascea. Ha preso il giro, non ne vedeva piangendo. Dante's first sonnet. It fascinated Cavalcanti. The eating of the heart is a powerful image.
Abandon all hope, he who enters there.
All right, we get it. Doom and despair. Got it.
Outside the city, he constructed an experimental station with sliding roof panels. A quote in Italian from Dante's Inferno hung by the entrance of the strange wooden structure. It read, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here."
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
This is it. Descend into hell itself. Abandon all hope.
We believe the unsub we're looking for is a male between the ages of 35 and 40 who's killing parental figures based on his need for revenge and punishment. He's designed his MO to recreate Dante's 9 circles of hell.
The Inferno is the first part of Dante's Divine Comedy. Within it, he describes the sinners he'd encounter in each circle of hell and the punishments they'd endure.
The first circle was for those who didn't accept God, therefore lived in limbo, punished by a blinding fog. Our first victim was found gassed in his apartment.
The second circle was for those guilty of lust, who'd be blown around in a violent storm. Therefore, our second victim was tied to a fence and electrocuted.
The third circle was gluttony, where sinners would be rained on and wallow in mud. Our next victim was found strangled on the side of the road, covered in dirt.
Our fourth victim was crushed, like the punishment in the next circle, reserved for greed. The fifth circle's wrath, where sinners were drowned in swampy water, which is exactly what happened in the next victim.
In the sixth, heretics were trapped in a burning tomb, like our most recent victim. And the next 3 circles are just as vicious.
Our unsub killed all the way through the 6th circle and marked his victims accordingly.
But his victims haven't committed the sins associated with each ring, which suggests that the killings are symbolic of the father figure who hurt him in the past.
In the poem, Dante traveled with the poet Virgil, who assured him he would enter paradise if he completed his journey. Consequently, we believe our unsub is metaphorically taking this journey with someone else. I will help you. I will help you. I will help you. His Virgil is most likely a sibling that suffered the same fate at the hands of an abusive father.
This man's patient. We also think he's an academic.
Right, so Dante was an Italian, writing in the 14th century. The Inferno is the first part of the Divine Comedy. Dante conceived the Inferno as this enormous pit. Ah, could you put it down there? Lovely. Thank you very much. Right. See, he imagined it as this huge pit, and he begins his journey outside the Inferno at the vestibule, which is the entrance to hell. He passes through the gateway and then journeys down through the Inferno. The Inferno has 9 circles spiraling down to the bottom.
Okay, so Morris got you through the ER.
The first circle of hell.
And Mila got you through surgery.
The second. Yeesh, what is that? Like the second circle of hell? That would be right below absolute celibacy.
What is this place? This is the second circle, the circle of lust. To this torment are condemned the carnal damned. They are the great lustful of the world. See there, Semiramis and Ninus, Antony and Cleopatra, Helen of Troy and Paris.
My sisters. Come, embrace us, Dante. We know what you want. We can see it in your eyes. Unbearable lust.
She's beautiful. Who is she?
Francesca da Rimini.
Francesca da Rimini.
It's Dante's Inferno, kind of. I play Francesca. I sleep with my husband's brother, Paolo.
I'm just getting warmed up. You want more, don't you? You deserve more. How about the thing you love the most? Smile from the jury. Ooh, that cold courtroom just giving itself over.
From a Category 3 to the 7th circle of hell. Delta, X-ray, Delta, I hope you guys aren't underneath that.
All right.
Were you aiming for Dante's 3rd or 4th circle of hell?
Sixth circle of hell.
Confined in a sweat box with a bloody nose and all the tissues are soggy.
I think that's the 7th.
No, 7th
God,
is when
you must be fun at parties.
I think we both know the flaw in that theory.
How's the system?
Floor 5, subway muggers, aggressive panhandlers, and book critics. Floor 6, right-wing extremists, serial killers, lawyers who appear on television. Floor 7, the media. Sorry, that floor is all filled up.
Where are they? That's the thing, sir. Thatch?
Yes, sir.
They're in the 7th circle of hell.
They're lucky to be alive.
If that's true, then we're in the 7th circle of hell. It does have its charms.
I have 6 other rooms in the house. Help Mommy out here. I mean,
the seventh circle of hell, you better show up.
I'm gonna be there. I'm just really busy tonight.
Louis, what are you doing here?
First off, how you doing?
How do you think I'm doing? I'm in the seventh circle of hell.
Get you with her bile, and may she bear you a dwarf, a succubus, and may you rot in that circle of hell reserved for the Borgia family.
There is no hell. No heaven either.
We are still in the seventh circle?
Yes, the abominable sands. It is here the damned did violence against God.
This is my lawyer. He's a little unorthodox. You're used to him. Mr. Reed, you remember Kenneth Fogg, the man from the tape?
How could I forget?
Hey, how you doing? I've slipped into the seventh circle of hell. Thank you. You?
We'll be going over our testimony right now.
Basically, the plan is I walk you through the tape. Step by step, I ask you questions.
Right, and we give you the explanation you came up with.
Exactly.
So all we gotta do is lie. That sounds simple enough.
Whose footprints are these? Don't ask me. You put them here.
Violence. What? Violence. The scattered remains look exactly like the engraving, the seventh circle of hell. I think that Tate is just the next victim, which means there are now only 2 circles left.
Okay, Captain's log, stardate 57372. We are here in the 8th circle of hell. Yours is the first. It's the one at the bottom.
Fraud. 8th circle of hell.
I'm Virgil, Counselor, and I'm guiding you through the gates of hell. We are now in the 9th circle, a circle of traitors. Traitors to country, traitors to fellow man, traitors to God.
We have here, Tweak. Captain Jack Sparrow.
Last time I saw you, you were all alone on a godforsaken island, shrinking into the distance. His fortunes aren't improving much.
Worry about your own fortunes, gentlemen. The deepest circle of hell is reserved for betrayers and mutineers. So there is a curse.
You know, they say the punishment's supposed to fit the crime, but this community service gig is like the 9th circle of hell. It can't be that bad.
Let me ask you something. What is the 9th circle of hell in Dante's Inferno?
Never read it. I'm more of a Milton fan.
It's pandemonium out there.
Yes, I know. We're working on it.
Great. While you're working on it, I'm going down in history as the mayor who let New York get sucked down into the 10th level of hell. All right, we've got no choice. Call the Ghostbusters.
Wait!
I hope you enjoyed this journey through the circles of hell, and the Ghostbusters even created the 10th circle of hell, which doesn't exist in the Divine Comedy. And I always found it interesting how the depiction of the Infernos, Dante's Infernos by the CBS and the BBC, essentially, it was that part where the investigation by police departments, both sides, they were studying serial killers through the circles of, through the several circles of hell. And very, very different approaches. I think it's time to open for questions. And unless Massimo, do you have...
No, I've seen this montage a few times, and every time I see it, it's more beautiful than the time before. You know, it is very extraordinary. So thank you again, Alessandro.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks. Thank you a lot, Massimo.
I can see there is maybe you can Alessandro answer the question about Fellini and La Dolce Vita.
It's actually, oh, I didn't get that question. I have a question here that says, when was the first clip of Paolo and Francesca filmed? Yeah, it was in the early 1900, which was, there are some references are saying 1911, others are saying 1910, and it was directed by Ugo Falena. I don't have the name of the production company. I think Massimo before mentioned that production company, but that was for the actual the first movie, not
the first movie. Yes, that was the first movie in 1908 by the Vitagraph Company of America, which was located in New York. The one you mentioned, which very likely is 1909, the one by Ugo Falena, of course, had the first real star of Italian cinema, Francesca Bertini, in the role of Francesca herself. And if you remember, the story is very much, is taken not so much from Dante, but from Boccaccio's relating the story of with the jester, you know, which is not part, of course, of the actual history. But yes, we have, in those 3 or 4 years, there are plenty of films which come out. The other, I have here, if not already mentioned, it says, this is Veronica Carlin. Could you please talk about Dante's influence on later 20th century Italian films, for example, La Dolce Vita? I don't know, Alessandro, if you know anything about it, but...
I'm sure either both of us, Massimo, went through Fellini's drawings, and perhaps there are some references, but to be honest, I don't have anything that I feel I can share, you know, any connection that it's worth it for me to share, I mean, that I was able to find.
If I may, Fellini, most of his life spoke about the idea of making a film on the Divine Comedy. And there is also a storyboard, you know, that he was supposed to follow until he decided that it was just impossible to make a film on the entire Divine Comedy. But certainly in many, if not most of his films, the influence of Dante, of certain themes, of certain episodes, and La Dolce Vita is certainly one of them, is quite notable. Now, I wouldn't be able to go into details, but in many of his letters, he speaks about the Divine Comedy. Of course, Fellini grew up in Rimini. He studied in a classical high school, Liceo Classico, and for the 3 years of the last 3 years of the Liceo Classico, he had to read first year the Inferno, second year, or let's say, you know, third year the Inferno, fourth year Purgatorio, and 5th year Paradiso. So he was very well acquainted with it. That's all basically I can say.
Yeah, actually, I guess when I went to school, we still had the same program, and I believe it was I did it in the middle school in that order, starting with the Inferno. And so we have Monica asking about, have you triangulated reference to Dante's Inferno in pop music? Actually, I have not, but definitely it sounds like an interesting project. Another question from Maria. Do Italian films make any references to Purgatorio or Paradiso? American films seems to focus on Inferno. I would expect the same in Italian cinema. It just sounds more interesting. I don't know. What do you think, Massimo?
Of course, what dreams come from, you know, that one is very much about paradise, or at least part of it. I mean, the Inferno is much more dramatic, and that's the reason why there is so much interest in films for Inferno and less interest for Purgatorio and Paradiso. By the way, a film on Purgatorio was made, and one on Paradiso was also made just after the 1911 film on Inferno. Only a few minutes of one and maybe 5 or 6 minutes of Paradise was found. One of the stories I read, I don't know if it is sure. The film, by the way, were found in North America, in the Library of Congress. They were found, both of them, Purgatorio and Paradiso. And a story I read is that it was found in one of the old gold mines in, I don't know, Arizona, you know, in North America anyway, and very likely brought by, there were many Italians working in gold mines in North America in the 1900s. Most of them, by the way, were Tuscans. And as the story goes, it was found in the ruins of this particular camp. If it's not true, well, like the Italian proverb says, è ben trovato, it's well found. But there is much less on Purgatory, from Purgatory and Paradise, simply because it's much more difficult to film Paradise. You know?
Yeah, we have another question. Actually, Monica wrote a follow-up. She meant, could you do that in the same manner as you did for the film? So could you do the same work on the pop music? I would be delighted to do it if we find the opportunity in the sense of time and some venue perhaps to present it, or you know, the motivation to spend some amount of time. I remember it took me several weeks to do that challenging work, but I was very excited to have used my background in computer science to triangulate all the databases and come up with a list of movies. So we have Jacqueline also asking, so references to the X circle of L seems to be a colloquial expression to give some cultural cachet to a film. By contrast, which movie and author, in your opinion, would try to deepen the reflection on Inferno for modern times? Fellini, obviously, Roman Polanski. Interesting. Yeah, in my research that more than 10 years ago, I definitely found a lot of those colloquial references, and the seventh circle of L is definitely the most used. I would say that there are different kinds of references, right? There were definitely some more sophisticated and more artistic references, and other very direct and more like citation, like just mentioning the circle of hell. And I would definitely, I guess it's another kind of approach. And I remember in the beginning of my research, the work done by Professor Amicare Iannucci, friend of Massimo from Canada, was extremely useful, especially I think on the reference of the movie Seven, when there are those electric poles, big poles with, and there is also a caption mentioning about these are the giants that are referred in the Inferno. So those kind of, let's say, references are definitely not really traceable by a computer yet. So I would definitely definitely require way more work. I would say it's definitely a different approach and more time to reflect those. I'm sure I don't have the background to actually fully explain and answer the question. I don't know if Massimo has anything to add.
No, not on the particular questions. I could speak a little bit perhaps on the question on which movie and author. This one is by Jacqueline Breda. I would try to deepen the reflection on Inferno for modern times. Spielberg has been talking for a number of years about doing a film on the Divine Comedy. And I read not long ago that, in fact, he was already planning to go ahead with it. Certainly in Italy, in Hungary, for example, in Belgium, a number of films in the last 30 years have been done on the Divine Comedy. I'll just mention perhaps a few. 2009, a film called Il Divin Segreto, The Divine Secret, Enigmas and Truth on Dante Alighieri, or 1965, The Life of Dante. So there are, and of course there was a TV Dante that Alessandro knows probably better than me by Greenaway. And the Greenaway wanted to do the entire Divine Comedy, and that was supposed to be done for the BBC, for the British Broadcasting Corporation. He couldn't. The task was too complex. He did the first few of Inferno, and then his colleague and co-writer, let's say, tried to finish the Inferno with mixed results, and the whole thing ended there. I don't know of any series on the Divine Comedy done in Italy. There have been TV films, by all means, TV, but not as a series, as an episode perhaps, or on the life of Dante, especially this year, especially on the 700th anniversary.
And I guess, Massimo, you also answered to Kerry with the question that says Game of Thrones was too large to make it into a movie. They decided to make it into a series. It was very successful. Has been there any consideration of making Dante's Inferno into a major TV series, not a movie? That's actually your answer.
Well, the Game of Thrones had a lot of money behind it. And to do the same, first of all, it would be very difficult to do Purgatory and Paradise, because they are much more intellectual, much more dealing with philosophy, with religion, than action, and so it would become almost impossible. And again, it would require the amount of money that certainly Italian cinema doesn't have. And American companies don't think that it will sell to make up for the money. There is a person who is devoting his entire life to making films on the Divine Comedy. He began here in Los Angeles. Right now, he works on the Divine Comedy because he's devoting his life to the Divine Comedy in Mexico. His name is Boris Acosta. He has done a couple of films on, again, on the Inferno. And for the very same reason, it is much, much easier because there is a clash of personalities throughout the Inferno. And that doesn't happen in Purgatory, and certainly doesn't happen in Paradiso.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about how to pitch that movie to producers and investors. I mean, it's not an easy job. I mean, and there's a lot of process into creating something that sticks with large public. And I remember that first movie, The Inferno, 1908, right, Massimo? That one had an extreme success. If I'm not wrong, at the box office, they more than $1 million at that time. So it was extremely successful, but also the audience, all audiences were eager to watch movies. I mean, it was just starting in the industry.
Also, at the time, 1908, Dante was very popular, and the Divine Comedy was very popular. From the middle, in fact, of the 19th century. I'm talking about England and North America. Now, that is the time when Dante societies in America start coming out, when the first translations of the Divine Comedy are brought to print. What is fascinating is that the 1908 film by the Vitagraph company was not shown in movies by itself, but it was shown with another 7 short movies, which had nothing to do at all with Dante, but had to do with almost one was about cowboys, but anyway, it was totally, and this one was just part of these long 2 hours that you would spend at a movie. But yes, it did make quite a bit of money. And the same, of course, something else. At the time, already the Divine Comedy, especially the episode of Paolo and Francesca, had been brought to the United States in theater. Dramas on Paolo and Francesca are from the 1800s, and they toured. These companies, they toured all over, Italian companies and American companies all over North America, showing these dramas on Paolo and Francesca, and of course that had an influence on the public and on the films also.
See, also Robert, I skipped him, but we already mentioned about Greenaway. Actually, Greenaway was part of the initial contribution we screened earlier. It was only the second part of all movie, let's say, and the first part was a montage using a lot of the Greenaway's production on TV Dante. I see Carrie again with what would you consider the most clever use of reference to Dante's Divine Comedy? That's clever, right? What do you mean by clever? I think I have a couple of examples. Sometimes, I mean, especially around those years when I was almost fully immersed in this project. Every time I was watching a movie, I believed I was seeing some references. So there's definitely the reference in Seven, the movie, especially the visual reference. For me, I'm very much more interested when I see visual adaptation of the poem. So when I see, when not necessarily when the actors or in the scripts they're citing, they're talking about the circles or the 7 circles of hell or the infernos, but when I see those elements translated into another media, which could be visual for me, and I really like the scene, one of the final shots with in the movie Seven when they meet in this very large environment in the desert with the electric pillars and resembling the giants. I think I put also in that short 13 minutes video a reference from a movie by our Italian director Sorrentino with a loan shark, uno strozzino, where he actually, at that time I was doing the project when I watched the movie, and to me I actually saw that kind of reference with the let's say the behaviors and the way the character is being described, some kind of reference to that. But maybe it's just what I've seen, and maybe Sorrentino didn't even know that, doesn't even know that. What did you have anything, Massimo, to add?
I mean, the one you mentioned are certainly the most striking. I can, just for the fun of it, I can say the ones I enjoyed the most are the three films with Totò and the Divine Comedy. You know, the 1948 Totò al Giro d'Italia with continuous reference to the Divine Comedy. 1950 Totò Morto che parla, and then of course Totò all'Inferno. And I'm, and that one is Totò who actually goes down to Dante's hell. They're absolutely memorable. Unfortunately, Totò is not known in North America. His sense of humor is perhaps too Italian and too bound also to his pronunciation, Neapolitan and so forth.
I don't know how much time do we have. I see that we still have many questions.
There is one year, if I may, sure. Catherine Burton, in the 1909 film Francesca da Rimini, why was the text in English rather than in Italian? I don't know if you want to answer.
I think the Cineteca di Bologna did an adaptation, but to be honest, I don't remember it. And probably it's a good observation, something that I don't remember I noticed at that time since we were here. Probably.
But one of the reasons certainly is that these films had a great success in North America. So they were prepared also for a North American audience. The subtitles, were, of course, were done in English, but that was quite common. Italian film, the same for Inferno of 1911. It became quite popular in North America.
Robert is mentioning about Machiste in Inferno, and actually some of the clips from Machiste were included in the first part that I didn't show. Yeah, it was another silent movie, really interesting.
About Saint Robert Cagne, about Simone Côté-Lapointe includes all three canticles. I don't really know this Divine Comédie, this experimental film of which Robert speaks before in another,
right.
Done in 2014. I don't know it. Very
interesting.
I'll go and check.
Yeah, definitely. Robert is mentioning 2D and 3D animations and video art and puppetry as well as electronic. It sounds really amazing as a project. I don't know this project. I know there's been like interactive shows more recently or over the past 5 to 10 years, but I didn't know about this one. Thanks, Robert.
Then Maria talks about the opera Francesca da Rimini. Of course, you're talking about the one by Zandonai, I suppose. The Zandonai, yes, it was presented again 3 years ago at the Met in New York using the old sets, actually. And my wife and I took a plane and went to see it and then came back.
And on this note, I'm sorry, but I think it's time to wrap up. I'd love to thank you both, Massimo and Alessandro, for this was very entertaining. And I think we have enough material and questions to have another couple of events at least. So maybe we might have another one in the future, but for now, thank you all also for joining us. For whoever is still interested in Dante, and especially the Inferno, not to mention, the Institute is presenting on April the 28th as part of Dante on Film, a conversation between Sandor Burke, the artist, and the director, Sean Meredith, about their movie Inferno. It's an animated movie. And then furthermore, during the year, we'll have the Week of the Italian Language, that will be entirely devoted to Dante Alighieri. So for sure, we will have plenty of events. So please stay tuned, follow us. And in the meantime, enjoy our Dante Plus exhibition, part of Dante 700. It's available, it's a virtual tour of the exhibition in Ravenna, nearby Dante Alighieri's tombstone. And it's available on the YouTube channel of the Italian Cultural Institute in Los Angeles. So please stay tuned. Thank you very much. Grazie a tutti. Grazie Alessandro. Grazie Massimo.
Grazie a
Buonasera.
voi, grazie a te, grazie a tutti voi.
Grazie a voi.
Grazie.
Buona
Buonasera.
serata.
Buonasera.